Move on over to the Eastern Conference. Once again, we're going to go back down towards the bottom of the barrel to start with. Of course, it's going to be the lottery teams here in the East. We already kind of mentioned a couple of them. Obviously, Detroit, if you haven't been following them, and their terrible loss streak that was going on. It was like, end of December again to January, right? I think the whole... Did you remember that or that? I'm sure you remember that meme, right? I'm sure we mentioned in our group chat.
Oh, yeah, I do.
Okay, yeah, the wing stop, and they finally won. Anyway, so the Detroit Pistons... Go ahead.
Do you remember the game against the Celtics where the Celtics almost choked it?
Yes.
And everybody was like, oh, my God, the Pistons are going to do it. And then the Celtics came back huge in the second half and got the win.
That's wild. Yeah, I do remember that. Anyhow, so Detroit, obviously, Washington Wizards, Charlotte Hornets, and especially as of recently, the Toronto Raptors. So I'm putting the lottery, tank bowl down here. Obviously, Pistons bad. Kind of like, obviously, it's gone pretty. Jaden Ivey struggling at the beginning of the year. That was a weird thing because also Monty Williams wasn't really using him. That's as far as I know in Detroit. And once again, kind of like, I still think I'd throw the label like with the Spurs, like they still are really, really young. Like overall, even Cade, Cade's missed a bunch of time, and and some people are saying his stats haven't improved and his efficiency, but okay, but also like the team around him hasn't really improved either. Outside of other than like Jalen Durant, he's kind of a rim running kind of defensive big. He's been really good for them, but other than that, not a lot of hope for Detroit. But honestly, it's kind of like the Spurs. What do we expect?
Yeah, I mean, when your second leading scorer is Bogdanovich, and that's no offense to him, but that just kind of shows you the state of your team. Like, you don't have a lot of talent. I will say the bright side about this team is you do have a lot of young talent, right? Like Cade Cunningham, although people are saying his stats haven't improved. If this is what he's going to be for his career, averaging 22, 4, and 8, that's great. Like, what are you talking about? Maybe he's not a number one, but maybe he could be a great number two. So I don't really understand the criticism of Cade, plus considering how the team is around him. But then you add in some other young guys like Jaden Ivey. He's having a solid year once they actually started to use him. Jalen Duren's having a good year. Azor Thompson's having a good year. Like, they do have some young pieces, but I think they need to add a lot more veteran talent around this team because... you have some guys like Evan Fournier, Danilo Gallinari, but he's played 6 games on the year. Fournier's played 2. Are they even on the roster anymore? I don't even know if they are.
I think they let go Gallinari. I see Fournier still on the roster because he was part of the deal. If I remember correctly, that they sent out Bogdanovich. I forget where they sent Bogdanovich.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just a lot of their team's so young, and then they even had a lot of different players in the past. Who they were supposed to be young, bright talents, but they haven't really ever found a role in the NBA, like Kevin Knox or Killian Hayes or all these guys that it's like James Wiseman. Like, okay, like, I don't know. I think that if the Detroit ownership actually wants to elevate this team, you got to kind of maybe take the Rockets approach where you have some nice young pieces and you got to start filling in the roster with some other talent that can maybe kind of elevate them even to a point where, hey, maybe we're a play-in team, and then you try to build from there, and these young guys start to elevate even further, and then you add another piece. But the Pistons, they're just in general, they're a mess. So yeah.
And I want to shout out Toronto for finally starting to lean into the rebuild that we've all kind of been waiting for. It's like they finally got rid of OG Anunoby at the deadline.
And
Siakam as well. So they finally pulled the plug on that and hit the reset button. And then obviously Charlotte. It just feels like they've always been bad, but they've never been lucky enough pick wise. Although I will say Brandon Miller playing really well for them, so hopefully him and LaMelo can be a building block going forward. And
it's also tough that LaMelo's been hurt throughout the year.
So that's the first 3 years. So we'll see. Obviously with them, and then Washington. Once again, we expected this out of Washington as well. So
I mean, Washington, they blew it up. So
yeah. Anyway, so that's kind of the lottery tier. Next tier is going to be saying play-in / once again, honestly, outside of one. Okay, I'll put 2 teams, but really one team. Even if these teams make the playoffs from the play-in, there's only one team I kind of have confidence I would even be able to do a first round upset in the East. But anyway, next tier kind of play-in. Brooklyn Nets, be interesting though to see them because they just let go of Jock Vaughn, so they may be leaning towards the reset. We'll see their mindset going forward. But anyway, going forward to the Atlanta Hawks, they've always kind of been in this range. Chicago Bulls and Orlando Magic. I think you can kind of tell Magic are probably the team I was alluding to. That was like probably the only team I feel like out of this group that will not only probably make the playoffs, but could maybe potentially, depending on matchup, do have a first round upset. But yeah, any thoughts here, John?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the Nets, I don't know. The Nets feel like one of those rosters where, like, they've got a lot of interesting pieces, but none of them feel like top two options on a championship team kind of deal. Like, Mikal Bridges could probably be a third option. But even though we saw him on the Suns when he was younger and they weren't able to win. So it maybe depends on the options, and that's no shot at Mikal because he's a stud. And Claxton's having a good year. Like, they have some interesting pieces, but I just don't know if they can really put it together because come playoff time, after Mikal Bridges, and even, like, is he really your primary scorer? After him, Cam Thomas he can get hoops, but also, like, not great at defense, kind of inconsistent sometimes. Is he ready for the bright lights? Who knows? So I don't know. The Nets, they don't feel like a team that could really put it together against a top team like the Celtics or Cavs or Bucks. Same for the Hawks. We've seen this. We've seen this team, right? Like, they have a lot of the same players that they've had throughout their runs. Trae Young, Clint Capella. We saw them try to trade and do the DeJounte Murray thing. Hasn't really worked out. Like, I don't know. I feel like the Hawks are kind of at this crossroads where they maybe need to do what the Raptors do and just lean into the rebuild and figure it out because it doesn't seem like it's working. They had that one Eastern Conference Finals run, and that was really it. Same with the Bulls. Come on. Like, this Bulls team feels the exact same as we've seen the last couple of years. Like, have they really changed anybody? Like,
no.
Like, Levine, Kobe White, DeRozan, Lonzo Ball, Vucevic, Caruso, Patrick Williams, Dosunma, Andre Drummond. Like, these guys have been on this team. Like, this feels like the same roster as last year, and, like, I feel like we're gonna get the same results. The interesting part about the Magic, the one thing that I would, makes me agree with you that they are interesting and could maybe pull off an upset. Now, the tough part is right now they'd be slated to play the Celtics, so it's not going to happen. But at the very least, they have some ascending young pieces that could take a step when the lights shine bright. You never know. Like, think about like the Celtics when Kyrie and Gordon Hayward both got injured. That one year with Jason Tatum and Terry Rozier and Jaylen Brown, that playoff run, they all kind of reached a level that we had not seen them reach before. And the nice part was that they had a veteran in Al Horford to kind of help out too. I don't know if the Magic really have like their own Al Horford. Like, they do have some veterans like Joe Ingles and Moritz Wagner, but I don't know if those guys are as effective as Al Horford was at that point because Horford is really he was stopping Joel Embiid, So I don't know if they have that piece, but I could see a world where Banchero and Franz Wagner and Jalen Suggs and these kind of guys and Cole Anthony's having a great year and Anthony Black is putting together an interesting season and Jonathan Isaac, when he does play, he's playing great defense. I could see a world where this kind of a team could like make some noise in the playoffs just because they have a lot of young, hungry players that are like, itching to take that next step.
Yeah, and it'll be obviously interesting to see. And for them too, because remember they started the season, they were at the top of the East for the first month or two. I know it's the first month or two, but they should played some elite level basketball. Lost, always not Franz. Why am I blanking on their tertiaries? Not more. Why am I? Let me pull it up.
What position are we talking about?
Forward. It's not Paolo. He just came back from
Wendell Carter Jr.?
Not Wendell Carter. Here, I'll pull up there.
Forward. I can just name them: Paolo, Franz Wagner, Moritz.
I guess
Wagner.
it's Franz. Sorry, it's the Wagners throw me off because I know one of them. I think it's Moritz is less effective to say the least. Yeah, it's Franz. Yeah, I had to look at the faces.
He's only played 47 games.
Yeah, he's missed time, but when he's an important floor spacer for them, and he's kind of been their second/third fiddle at times.
The reason I said Wendell, by the way, is because he's only played 29 games this year. He's dealt with injuries too.
Yeah. So, and once again, though, regardless,
but he's a center. So.
Yeah, regardless, relatively young team like we're alluding to, so it could also just be a first round exit that something they build on long term. Or
if they play the Celtics, yeah. I mean, honestly, it probably will be anyway. But who knows?
Yeah, or they could, be one of those teams that lose in the play-in and don't even make it. But it's a little bit disappointing there. And then only thing about the Hawks I do want to say is seems like this year they're starting to some of their younger pieces, like they're playing a lot more Kongwu, and he's been producing well, so that could be interesting. Once again, we'll see come playoff time because I feel like we said this every year. No offense to Clint Capella, he's solid, but then I think Jalen Johnson kind of growing into being a solid four for them and much better fit than John Collins was. So we'll see, but yeah, Atlanta's been weird nonetheless because like you mentioned, they had that one great run and haven't really been able to build off that successfully, even though they've been relatively aggressive in trying to do so. So that's playing territory. Now let's move up to second tier contenders. And this team was tough because they probably are going to be playing, but with recent history, it's kind of tough to not at least give them their respect. Miami Heat, of course, is down there at 7. It's just one of those things that you got to see them fail at this point to make noise in the playoffs. And maybe they could also start a run here late in the season and improve their seeding anyway. Still within striking distance to improve their seeding. Right now, though, they're at the 7th seed. Indiana Pacers down to 6th seed. You mentioned with Halliburton, and they've been aggressive and pushing their chips here. And so we'll see how that goes. Philly, obviously going to be interesting, and really because Embiid, the health of Embiid. We'll see. It still seems like his status is up in the air if he'll come back coming from that knee injury. And then obviously the New York Knicks. They're kind of the tweener here, but I would still put them in this category and second tier contenders in the East. But any thoughts here?
No, I mean, I agree with the list as well. The East is just really interesting because unlike the West, I actually do think that like some of these teams kind of in this range could like make a lot of noise because, I mean, for example, like the Heat, we literally saw last year, the 8th seed Miami Heat going to the NBA Finals. So I don't know. The East is weird. I could see the Pacers making some noise as well. I don't necessarily believe in the Knicks and 76ers. I kind of feel the same way about them as I did the Timberwolves. So I'm not going to repeat the whole thing, but it's just like we've seen these kind of teams in the playoffs before, and we've seen it not work. So, but the Heat and Pacers feel real interesting to me, just because the Heat are they're one of those teams, and it's just something about Jimmy Butler too. Like this is just how he is, where they step up in the playoffs, and all of a sudden these random role guys, like who knows, maybe it's the rookie Jamie Jaquez Jr. or Duncan Robinson again, or somebody off the bench, Caleb Martin last year, all these kind of guys, they just step up. Like all of a sudden they just start going crazy and they have really big playoff series. And so I as a Celtics fan, never count out Miami. And then for the Pacers, I mean, Tyrese Halliburton, he's a stud. Miles Turner, he's having a good year. Pascal Siakam, he's great. Like it feels like they've kind of figured out their roster. And it's specifically around the ascension of Halliburton that who knows what they could do in the playoffs. They feel interesting.
Yeah, my only worry. So one of my worries with Indiana is outside of Halliburton. Like if it's a series and he's been dealing with injuries, who knows? But I'm knocking on wood. But in the playoffs too, if teams start maybe doubling, just take him out of the equation. My only worry with Indiana is can Siakam take it? And he's only been there for so long. So just general chemistry and fit may be an issue there. And then Philly, like I said, for Philly, it's just if Embiid gets back, and I think especially I probably should look more into this. If this injury may be a little bit of a blessing in disguise, especially if he comes back like a couple weeks before the season ends, so then there's no conditioning worrying, because Philly was him and Maxey were running a great 2-game there, and I mean, it was kind of, I know Embiid has had some bad performances, but also a lot of those times in the playoffs, Embiid was banged up. So as I'm saying, this could be a blessing in disguise for the Sixers, depending on how their momentum is at the end of the season, and maybe possibly their first round matchup. And then the Knicks, I do want to put a little respect on them and say they're a little bit different because they've changed some of the pieces that we've criticized, like R.J. Barrett gone, and I think Anunoby's more of a better fit because, like we mentioned, like with Barrett and Randall, and then now Jalen Brunson, there's only one basketball, and all of them are guys that need the ball in their hands to. They're all scorers, they're all, and they're not, especially Barrett and Randall, not really spot up guys. Well, Anunoby is totally fine being that guy and also playing great defense and just doing a little bit of everything. So Yeah, New York could be interesting. Just like I said, I think that could be because who knows? They can make noise. And we've seen Brunson perform in the playoffs before. He did it. I know they only went to the second round last year, but had some good moments. And then obviously with Dallas, 2 years prior, he showed that as well with and without Luka, in that playoff run that they had. So just throw a little bit of respect to the Knicks, but hey, I could easily also see the Knicks nicking and getting upset in the first round.
Yeah, well, I mean, the tough part is that like obviously if the season ends right now, like it would be Knicks Sixers, and
they may not have Mitchell Robinson too, so that would be a bad matchup for them, especially if Embiid's back.
And then let's say hypothetically they win that series. First off, it'd probably be a war because if you're going against Embiid, like that and you don't have Mitchell Robinson, that's going to put a lot of stress on your defense. And we know that, Tibbs likes to really play his stars. All right, he plays them a lot. Like if you're a starter on this team, you're going to play a ton. Plus Taj Gibson,
at least 35. Hey, Taj is in Brooklyn now, or is he still in net?
Yeah, I know, but you know who knows? Maybe somehow Taj comes
released.
available and he's back in the Knicks. Yeah. But that was just more a joke of Taj Gibson always being on Tibbs teams and playing literal tons of minutes for them. But yeah, if you're a starter on Tibbs teams, like you play a ton, right? Yeah. And so if I just feel like if a first round series does come down to where they're playing the Sixers, or even let's say the Sixers do drop, I don't think the Magic jump up to the 5 seed, but you're playing the Pacers or the Heat. Like any of those series feel like they could go 7. They could if the Knicks are to win it.
Yeah.
I could see like the Heat blow them out of the water because it's the Heat. Like they've
they turn it on.
They turn it on. So and then you have to go in a second round series against the Bucks, Cavaliers, Celtics. Whoever's kind of up there. Like that just feels tough to me. Like. I think the Knicks and 76ers both can get past the first round, but then after that, things just get a little murky all of a sudden.
Yeah. So, and that's why we have most of these teams. Anyway, so we'll see. Obviously, seeding will matter, but it seems like we're pretty much in solid agreement about that second tier of teams that will probably maybe just first round or second round at best cap, unless, like we said, extenuating circumstances, which could happen. But anyhow, let's go to the top of the Eastern Conference where these are the main contenders, and it is the Milwaukee Bucks at 3, even though they are an interesting team. But they're still at 3 in the East. And then 2, the Cleveland Cavaliers did not get off to a good start. I don't know if you remember or saw. There's I'm not sure if it was within the organization or just general hubbub, but there's talks they're going to trade Donovan Mitchell. They should just sell, and then oh man, all of a sudden now they're rolling now that they got everyone back. And then obviously your Celtics sit alone at the top of the East, and especially 6 games ahead as well. I think they are definitely. I think I've seen that they're the favorites to make the finals because of just how well they've done against the East and how they have so much cushion. So, yeah, this is your time if you want to, wax poetically about your Celtics.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. I'll start with the Bucks. The coaching stuff is weird, and it's gotten weirder as time has gone on.
Especially today, because today...
Yes.
Anyway.
There's just been a lot of random comments coming out about this whole thing. First off, it was weird when it happened. Everybody's like, really? You're going to fire him?
Even though
he's been doing a great job.
Literally
what was his name? Adrian Griffin, right?
First year on the job.
Yeah.
He puts Budenholzer out the door for.
Yeah, and then I saw some rumors out there that maybe they're thinking okay, was it Giannis pushed him out? What happened here?
Because the players danced that at the very first game he got fired. Yeah. They were
yeah, and so people are trying to find they want who's to blame because this is confusing. They hired Doc. It's not been good since. They're 3-10 in the 3-7 in the last 10 games. And I remember too, it was even worse before those wins because they started off 6 games in a row losing. So it has not been pretty ever since Doc has shown up. And even some of these losses, they almost lost to by 30 to the Miami Heat. And did Jimmy even play in this game?
Probably not.
I don't think he did. The leading scorer was Nikola Jovic. Jimmy did not play. Kevin Love dropped 19 on you. We had a vintage Kevin Love performance. In 23 minutes, by the way. 23 minutes, he dropped 19 points. Jimmy did not play. You lost by 30 to them. I don't know, like
They lost to
lost
the
the
Grizzlies.
Suns,
They had
lost,
like G Leaguers and like
yeah,
it was like literally were scrapping a roster together.
yeah, they lost by like 20 to the Jazz and the Timberwolves. Like it's just been a little bit rough as of late. And I remember, there was even a couple games that were one of the wins that they've had. They had back-to-back games against the Pistons, by the way, and they won both. But there was one of those games where it was like 141 to 134 or something, 135. Like the Pistons almost took them out. Like they were up there scoring buckets with them, and the Pistons are not a good offensive team. So it's just been interesting. And then now all of a sudden there's these comments coming out where Doc is like, well, when I took the job, I told him it's pretty weird that you're firing him. And like on the calls, and they were like, yeah, well, we already did it, so it's done with. Do you want the job? And he took the job, I guess. And then he's like, I probably should have taken it after the All-Star break because there's this tough road stretch. I don't know. The way they're talking about it is just so strange.
And then also, to add, he was already,
go ahead.
it was already reported that he was an advisor for the Bucks before, for him, to kind of help with Adrian Griffin. And then also I found weird too him throwing out, maybe he's trying to save some skin here. It was his idea to trade James Harden to the Clippers. That was all weird. But yeah, he had quite an All-Star weekend, media spree.
Yeah, it's just been strange, and I don't know. I'm not counting the Bucks out. I'll say that, because with Giannis and Dame, those guys have made so many deep playoff runs throughout their careers on separate teams. Middleton's great too. Like I'm not willing to count it out, right? Regardless of the coaching, because I do feel like, and also let's put some respect on, like, Bobby Portis has had some big playoff runs. Brook Lopez has had, a lot of playoff runs throughout his career. Malik Beasley's been great from 3-point range this year. So like they have a good roster. They have the talent. They have people who have won a championship before. So I'm not going to count them out, because I think even regardless of coaching, I do think that they could be going to the Eastern Conference Finals, and who knows, maybe even go to the finals. But the one thing that does worry me about this whole situation is something that we did kind of see even when Budenholzer was the coach, is when they come up against some of these other elite teams. And it's not even, because with the Budenholzer thing, there was like, Brad Stevens is out coaching you. I don't know if Missoula is going to outcoach you. I mean, and that's no shot at Missoula. It's just, he's not the strategic mind Brad Stevens was. But when those teams present things that you can't handle, is Doc the coach that can overcome those? I don't know. Yeah. I really don't. And I say that, and I think it's a completely fair criticism, because Doc has coached the most 3-1 leads to be choked in NBA history. And I don't think it's relatively close. I think we made a post on our Instagram like a couple of years ago about this, and I think he had another one after that. So I think it's 5 or 6 3-1 leads that he then lost the playoff series. At least 4. I know at least 4, but I'm pretty sure he had another one since then, maybe 2. Anyway, point being, that just shows to me that he wasn't, whenever things hit the fan for the other team, he was not able to overcome the ways that they changed things up. Because when you have a 3-1 lead, you got to win one more game. And yet he was not able to strategically overcome those things, because clearly the team was talented enough to get the lead in the first place, and the strategy was good enough to get the lead in the first place. But then when they changed, you couldn't. So, I don't know. That's the one thing that worries me, is that could hold them back, is that all of a sudden there's some Achilles heel that this other team has figured out, and they're not able to overcome that. For the Celtics, I think they're the real deal. I mean, they made it to the finals a couple of years ago. I was upset when they traded Marcus Smart. They got Porzingis. He's been fantastic this year. And he's really fit in, I think, with the team, which was, kind of the biggest concern considering how it went in Dallas. And then Drew Holiday, he's fantastic. He's been really good. And having him as like your 5th scoring option is pretty big. So, yeah, I really believe in it. And can't forget about Derek White, too. He's been playing amazing this year. Like, there was talks that he may even get into the All-Star game. So he's been fantastic. I think the Celtics are the real deal. I personally think they're the favorite to win the NBA Finals. Maybe the Nuggets above them, just because the Nuggets are the reigning champions. But I think they're probably top 2, top 3 team in terms of odds and winning it all, in my opinion. And then for the Cavs, I will say the interesting thing about the Cavs is we haven't like quite seen them like put it together in the playoffs yet. Like last year felt a little disappointing considering how hyped up this roster was. You got Mitchell, you got Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, Darius Garland. Like you got a lot of freaking talent. Isaac Okoro was drafted highly. Karis LeVert has been a solid bench piece. They add Max Strus like this year. I don't know. We'll see what happens this year, but I do think that this could be the year they maybe put it together.
Yeah, they're interesting. Also, in the fact that a little bit like you talk about with OKC, them just youth, as you mentioned, outside of Donovan Mitchell, a lot of those guys, and I mean Jared Allen said last year, like it seemed like they weren't ready for the bright lights or physicality of the playoffs. Yeah. I think we also saw too last year, especially they had issues running both Mobley and two bigs basically because Mobley, his outside shot last year was not great. It seems like there's been emphasis for him to be more willing to spread the floor, but I think that's also why though they got Strus and Gorgeous Niang was in case. And regardless, gotta with Donovan Mitchell, I think it's obvious you gotta and Darius Garland too, but especially Mitchell space the floor, give him places to drive and kick, and stress out the defense. So
yeah, that'll
be an interesting piece, and we'll see. But and then Boston too, just to kind of go in reverse where you went. I love as long as Porzingis is healthy, and even then, that's why Al Horford. He's proven to be good insurance as a big man in moments or even games in the playoffs. I think grabbing Drew was very underrated, which leads me to my next point. I love Derek White, so I'm not going to expand on that.
Even just on the matchups of Damian Lillard, Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, like those guards are going to be real important. But go ahead.
But and that's where it gets to a point where you got Drew Holiday away from the Bucks. And I think we're seeing a little bit one of the reasons why they're struggling. Obviously, you already alluded to it, is their defense is just it's taking a step down. Obviously, losing a premier defender, a guy who could literally guard 1 through 3, and then it's caused issues with their defensive system. Brook Lopez, he's had he's been frustrated at times this year, and I'm sure his defensive numbers are not looking as good as they were in previous years, and such. And then obviously, I think even outside of Drew, lost a couple other, even like Grayson Allen, he's been there. I know a couple of years ago, Dante DiVincenzo, he had a good run, unfortunately towards ACL. I think that year, that his last year there, but so fortunately they're missing some also their pieces they used to rely on, even like an old Wes Matthews. I don't think he's on the team anymore. So
he's not.
And even Chris Middleton's not the young spring chicken he used to be. He's still a solid defender, but it's mostly because of his length, to be honest. Bucks, it'll be interesting to see if they can turn the defense around, figure ways to get stops. Do they utilize Giannis a little more, use him as a chess piece, because that's also been a criticism too, is hey, Giannis is a great help defender, but can you maybe do more with him? So we'll see if the Bucks can figure that out. But I'm with you. I think the Celtics, in my mind, at least once again, as of right now, on paper, are the favorites definitely to make the finals. And I think even the odds show that too. A lot of it's like Celtics. That's probably one of the reasons why I think they're the favorites to win it all, is because they're already the favorites to get in from the East. While the West, we already mentioned, like, I know I'm pretty sure Vegas splits it down to between the Nuggets and Clippers, but also there's other teams that probably that Vegas has to respect a little bit as well. While in the East, it feels like Boston's kind of on top in their own kind of sub tier of their own there. It's gonna be interesting to see how it all shakes out. But like I said, I think East matchups may not matter as much, except for obviously keeping an eye on the Heat, wherever they match up, especially if they're still at the bottom of the pile. But they could easily make a run here late in the season and not be as much of a sneaky 8 seed like they were last year. But who knows? Maybe they will, regardless. But anything else you wanted to throw in?
That's gonna be it for me. I know that we probably made it sound like pretty open and closed too, that upsets won't happen, but I mean that's just kind of the NBA.
Yeah, and
there might be like one, but for the most part, it kind of gets chalk.
It's a wild league. Like we literally saw. I think even the kind of reference last year. I remember the Wolves barely made it in, and then it didn't help that McDaniels punched a wall, so they lost their best wing defender. And I think Naz Reid was also hurt or something too, so they lost him and they were the only team that gave the Nuggets a little bit of a run too in the first round. It's just they didn't have those two guys. So just things like that. And obviously you mentioned the whole Heat thing. And remember, the Heat were literally a quarter away from being eliminated by the mid Bulls that we mentioned, in the play-in. So who knows what the league will have in store going forward. Outside of the lottery teams, it just feels like we'll see what happens with the rest of these. But lottery gang with me. We'll see what happens. I'm not sure there's like a top prospect. I don't know. We're getting to college basketball here soon, so I'm sure we'll see more mocks and stuff. And speaking of that too, we will be back at some point. I got to start. We'll probably start with quarterbacks and such. With NFL draft coverage coming up soon, of course. So we'll probably give you our rankings. But we're just two guys doing this for really free off the internet. So.
Yeah, I did want to add actually on the playoffs real quick, something that you said earlier, that a lot of the matchups too haven't been decided. Like both conferences are pretty close at certain spots. Like for the East, probably outside of the Celtics because they've got, a 6-game lead on the Cavs, I think. So they probably hold on to it unless, maybe something weird happens. They probably do, but like the Cavs all the way down to the Magic, there's like a 6-game difference, 7-game difference. Like it's not that big. So some of the matchups there could change, and the West, some of the matchups there could change too. Like honestly, any of the spots, because like the Timberwolves have 39 wins, the Nuggets at the 4 seed have 36. So who knows? The Nuggets are still in play to get the number 1 seed. So it'll be really interesting to see the matchups because, like you said earlier, honestly, with the NBA, it's a matchup league. Like with the NFL, it feels like it's not as big on matchups outside of like certain ones. Like, unfortunately, my Cowboys, like, they just can't get past the Niners or certain teams like that. But for the most part, like, there's a lot more parity to where in the NBA, specific matchups could be everything when it comes to going all the way to, like, the conference finals, for example. So, yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Obviously, we'll talk about it probably closer. We'll probably, actually go more in depth once we get those matchups because, that's just easier for us to do so once we have a clear picture. So, who knows? We may check in. I'm just once again, like we said, league never sleeps, so we may do more NBA before going forward. But an intermittent mix it in with the NFL. But it was good to talk for the first time about hoops for this year, and obviously it won't be our last. So we'll see how this all shakes up, and it'll be interesting to see if we need to come back before the playoffs. But nonetheless, that'll do it for John and myself. As always, thank you very much for watching and like and subscribing, etc. We will see you all next time. Adios.